Look what I found. This is my grandfather's partbillet, which means he was a part of the Communist Party of the USSR from the 60s, I believe. Look at the picture of Lenin, and there is a little quote which states, "The party is the mind, the honor, and the conscience of our time." But that is not what I was going to talk about today. That was just a trick to lure you in. So I've been studying dialectics more seriously in the past 3 weeks. Some comrades and I, we've been reading this person and some of his students as well. This philosopher, Ilyenkov, he is quite famous in the post-Soviet lands because he was one of the key thinkers and key philosophers after the death of Stalin. Of course, because of de-Stalinization, there was more liberty, so to speak, among the philosophers, and the philosophical thought kind of picked up again. That was not really because Stalin was very, very repressive and against everyone. There was a whole complicated relationship between dogmatics during the Stalin era. There were quite a few people who were not willing to look beyond Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin. They would always need to support themselves with the statements from the aforementioned thinkers. So the originality of thought was not really present. And it was a complicated thing. I'm not going to try and justify anything. If you want to learn more about this time period, the 50s and the 60s in the USSR, I encourage you to do so. But I highly recommend Ilyenkov because his writings on dialectics is really eye-opening to me, because in the past I was very much a spontaneous student of dialectics. I would kind of derive my theory from my praxis, and I sometimes would learn the simplest things through trial and error, which is fine, I suppose, but it did cause me some discomfort. So now I'm trying to save myself from future mistakes by actually studying dialectics a little bit more formally. And a lot of the things that I'm studying, they don't come easy to me. One of the reasons why is because I'm not so good with terminology. I'm having a hard time with some of the more abstract concepts, and I'm glad that dialectics mostly deals with the real world. Well, because I'm looking into the materialist dialectics, not the idealist dialectics, which I know exists as well. Some of the key things that I want to share with you today concerning dialectics and dialectical materialism is that everything is a process, right? And I kept saying that for as long as my channel existed. But if you look at the examples of processes in real life, it becomes so apparent that this is the case, and that's pretty much impossible to argue with. But there are some instances that I find curious and helpful at the same time. For example, Marx's claim that production and distribution are a part of the same process, and that the way we produce our necessities is going to necessarily dictate the way we distribute these necessities. It is a very, very important difference, because a lot of times when people are looking into reformism and like social democracy, they think that the only problem with capitalist production is the way the necessities are distributed. They kind of want to preserve the production, the capitalist production. They may care about the exploitation, but they care so much more about the distribution. So they may say, let's distribute the goods more evenly, let's make sure everybody has their needs met, and then we're going to have a better world, which is true. If we have a better distribution system, it's definitely going to improve the conditions of the working class. However, if we want to target the root cause of all the suffering and evils of the modern world, we have to look into the production as well. And this is where the getting rid of exploitation comes. And this is where Marx's concept of the division of labor also comes into play. Marx claimed famously that the division of labor in the olden times was the first step towards alienation, and that totally makes sense to me, because imagine if you buy bread, for example, or get bread somehow. The only thing you have is this material object that you can consume, and it's kind of abstract the way it is made. You may have some ideas about how it is made, you may even know about the process well, but if you never participated in the process, if you never saw how all of these steps of production take place, You are not going to be fully comprehend that object, and you may not be able to fully appreciate that object because it will remain in this realm of abstract to you. Of course, you will be the consumer, but it's going to be a more passive role. In order to be a more active participant of the process, you will need to partake in at least some parts of the production of the bread. And I don't think Marx claims that we have to participate in every single stage of the process of production. I don't think that this is feasible or even necessary, but the alienation of labor that has been caused by the division of labor is apparent. Like in so many industries, we are so separated from the product and the fruits of the labor that not only do we not have access to the fruits of the labor and that final product, but we also may not even be aware of the other processes that happen so that this product comes to life. And this type of alienation is ancient, according to Marx. So this process started a long, long time ago, but this contradiction has been exacerbated during the Industrial Revolution. And now in our full-on capitalist times, we can see the outcomes of alienation. We can see the rise in depression. We can see how people are unhappy with their lives. We can see all of these psychological outcomes of the alienation. And this is just one part of the problem, right? Alienation is not the only problem of the capitalist production. Obviously, exploitation is the key problem with capitalist production. So I think it is a very important thing to learn from Marx that production and distribution, and he also actually mentions exchange. He says production, exchange, distribution, and consumption. All of these are the same process. And I think this is a very important thing to master. And I'm going to be looking into this a little bit more just because I'm so fascinated. I think this is one of the key aspects to understanding the modern world and how we can change it. Now, another important and interesting process and fundamental process to look into is the way our thinking processes happen. And there is a mechanistical, materialistic view on how the brain is the main thing that thinks. So the brain in itself is a thinking machine. However, Ilyenkov points out to the fact that brain is just one of the parts of the process of thinking and cognition. So he's saying brain, then the receptors that we have, and he actually includes hands as one of the key receptors, and then the product that, or the object that is being studied or being looked into. These are the main components of the thinking process. And just think about it. If there is no object to ponder about, if there is no object to look into, to study, and to communicate with, to change or to consume or to do something with, how is thinking going to happen? What are you going to be thinking about? You cannot be thinking about something that doesn't exist. Even if you make something up, even if you imagine something, it is going to be based on the material objects that surround you. So your brain by itself cannot produce thought processes. It can only produce thought processes together in tandem with the receptors and the material world that surrounds it. And ultimately, dialectical monism postulates that nature reflecting upon itself is what the process of thinking is. The process of conscious cognition is when the substance of the universe is reflecting, thinking about itself and about how it can transform and change itself, which to me is just mind-blowing in a good way. And I think that we all should be looking into this. So I'm not sure whether Ilyenkov was translated into English. Possibly he was. I will include some of the articles that we've been reading down below in the description box. If you know Russian, you can read them. If they are translated into English, I will try and find them. So I'm definitely going to be trying to make more videos about dialectics just because this is something that is so near and dear to me, and I think it is essential for all of us, especially if we are interested in changing the world. So let me know what you think. Let's keep this conversation going, and I hope that you have a great day today.